do you have any? I have a PDF copy. So if anyone wants to read it, doesn't have the book, let me know and I'll email you the PDF copy. But this is what the book looks like. It's really, really good. I wanted to start. So we're going to go through a bunch of different things, some tips, some tricks. If you've not read The Shift, in the beginning portion of it, I thought this was brilliant. It's written by Gary Keller, of course. And in there, he has what he calls shift prescriptions, right? So as you go through it, it goes over some of the diagnoses in your businesses that you might be lacking or need help in or what have you. And it actually tells you what specific shift tactic, and there's 12 tactics, and I'll discuss them with you. We're going to go over tactic 1 and 2. So this is a series, right? So tactic 1 and 2, I'm going to have the Haras, the Lallies, the Tongs, Tony Pace, a bunch of instructors to help teach the classes in between. And then I'll finish up tactics 11 and 12. So we're going to break it up. Every 2 weeks, we'll have this course talking about different tactics. And in the diagnosis, it's really cool. It says if you have budget issues, that's tactic 2 and 3. If you have business planning issues, that's tactic 2. Buyer presentation, tactic 9. Buyer scripts, tactic 9. Tactic 12. Employee issues, this is if you have a team or you're growing. Tactic 3. So it has this whole thing, and like literally it makes it as fail-proof as possible because everything is already set for you. So here's the tactics, all 12. Tactic 1 is called Get Real, Get Right. It's mindset and action. Tactic number 2 is remargin your business, expense management. So we're talking about tactics 1 and 2. Hey, Maria. Tactic 3, do more with less, which is leverage. Tactic 4 is find the motivated and lead generation. Tactic 5 is get to the table, lead conversion. Tactic 6, catch people in your web, internet lead conversion. Tactic 7, price ahead of the market, seller pricing strategies. Tactic number 8 is stand out from the competition. Number 9 is create urgency. 10 is expand the options. 11 is master the market of the moment, short sales, foreclosures, REOs. And number 12 is bulletproof your transaction. So those are the 12 tactics. Again, we're talking about 1 and 2 today. So I was going through this. I've read Shift a handful of times. Oddly enough, I've never read the forward and the introduction that Garrett wrote. And I thought it was pretty insightful. So I highlighted a couple of things and I wanted to read it to you because it's like, it sets the tone for our discussion today. So in this forward, he's talking to his son and he mentions that he's in like parent mode, dad mode. He asked his son to do something. The son didn't want to do it. And instead of just lecturing him, he was talking about wanting to do something and needing to do something and growth mindedness. And this is kind of how he started this thing. So he says, in order to get to the middle of life at anything, so he has middle is average, then you have like the failure side and the ultimate success side, this scale. He's talking about in the middle. In order to get to the middle of life at anything, all you have to do is what you want to do, what you like to do. But if you want to live on the right side of average at anything that really matters to you, you must move past doing only what you want to do and do some things that you don't want to do. And the more you can conquer this and do what you need to do, but don't like to do, the farther to the right of middle you get to go and get to live. In other words, the measure of your success in life is in direct proportion to what you're willing to do when you don't want to do it. And I found that fascinating because we always talk about people's one thing. And I'm telling you, I talk to so many agents about inside of KW, outside of KW, and our one thing is lead gen. Our one thing is always lead gen. And it matters most during a shifting market. When the market is easy, and I would say the last 2 years during COVID, the market's been super, super easy, right? It's been easy to get buyers that are interested in buying a home, they're first-time home buyers, because if they're first-time home buyers, the amount that they're paying in rent is so close to the amount of the mortgage, it's almost like a no-brainer. So there's not a whole lot of convincing that you have to have, right? If you have a military client that's PCSing out, they got to sell anyway. It's not much convincing when you tell them that, oh my gosh, you're going to make $150,000 when you sell your home. That's not a whole lot of convincing. It's easy. So there's limited amount of lead generation that's occurring in most of those cases because the market is so good. When a market is in a shift, oh my gosh, you have to buckle down on what matters most. Lead gen is definitely one of them. So I'm not going to call anyone out. There's I talk to a lot of you guys in person, right? So some general examples is what I find, people will make excuses not to lead gen. They'll literally make excuses not to lead gen, right? There's a couple of instances of agents that I've spoken to that will go out of their way to be creative, not to lead gen. So for instance, I'm going to throw an example. If this example applies to you, don't make a face. It's a poker face. Had a client or an agent that we're talking to that said they wanted to, and this is not a knock on someone. So if this is an idea that you think is good, it's not. But they wanted to create flyers and hand out flyers for real estate in like an area, like a public area, right? And the question that we kept asking is, just call, just do lead generation, just call. They said, no, I'm going to create these really nice flyers and blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to go to this crowded area. I'm just going to hand out flyers. Because I think in their mind, they're like, the more people I contact, right? But we're selling real estate. It's the largest investment that someone's going to make in their entire life. That creative thing is a way to avoid doing the thing, which is just do this. That's all you got to do. You don't have to get in your car and drive it. You don't have to go to the printer to print anything. You don't have to have a graphic designer design it. Just call. Here's a list of people to call. Just call that list. And people will talk themselves out of making that call. Every single time they'll talk themselves out of it. So we have classes for all that kind of stuff. It's not a knock on anyone because everyone has that call reluctance that they do. But you have to get in the mode of being comfortable being uncomfortable. And whether that means door knocking, whether that means making some phone calls, whether that means calling your existing sphere, those things are super important. So I make mention of this because during a shifting market, that could not be more important, is to ensure, and you can gamify it however you guys want. One easy way to do it is just say, I need to have X amount of real estate conversations each and every day. And a real estate conversation, you can define it how you want. I was talking to Sam earlier about it, and she was saying, hey, she's being more proactive on social media and communicating with people. And I said, that's fantastic. That's great. Make sure that those are legitimate conversations. Texting out and not receiving anything back is not a conversation. A conversation is a two-way conversation, right? So if you can gamify it in your mind to have a certain number of real estate conversations, I think that would be all the better for it. So then Gary goes on and he says that the era of extra effort, after spending more than a year traveling across the United States and Canada teaching Shift and interacting with top agents who have read and implemented its tactics, I'm more convinced than ever of this incapable truth. We're in an era of extra comfort. When a shift occurs, people lose jobs. It's that devastating straightforward. You read the headlines or you listen to the news, and the overriding concern of almost everyone is, will I lose my job? I say almost everyone because there is a group that's not concerned, and you guessed it, it's the people living to the right of the middle. A shift becomes the era of opportunity for those who are willing to do what others won't. There is no escaping this certainty. There is only dealing with it. In a shift, the effort that got you where you are isn't going to keep you where you are. And if you just came from the era of average effort, then most likely you notice that getting by, effort returned getting by results. Average effort meant that you got to keep your job. In the era of extra effort, average effort could only well cost you your job. So, hey, Tim, come sit down. So what he's basically saying is, you have to change your tactic, you have to change your effort, especially in a shifting market, right? And I thought that was brilliantly put because, have you guys noticed a lot of agents, especially who have been successful over the last couple of years, they'll come up and they'll say it like, hey, I have coaching services now. I'm like, coaching services? Because we've been doing it for a year and a half. What are they coaching exactly? Right, so they were tricked with a little bit of success. Whatever success is measured by, whether it's income, a certain number of transactions, a certain volume of closings, or what have you, you haven't been really tested in real estate unless you've been through a shifting market, because everything that you've done up until the point to be successful, you're gonna have to change it. It's different. It's totally, we're going to go through what that looks like and what that means, but you almost have to have gone through a shift to kind of understand that. So guys, if you don't already have it, Shift is a really good book. If you don't want to buy it, I'll give you the PDF. Just tell me and I'll email it to you. So we're going to go over the tactic number 1, which is gaining mind over market. Let's see. Oh, this way, maybe. Just kidding. You guys have the, I don't know if you guys have, you guys want to see my notes to you. I'll email it to you as soon as we're done. I also have, I printed this out, which I thought was, I found it, I stumbled upon it while I was preparing for this, but have you guys ever seen the triangle? Yeah, leads, listings, leverage. There's actually this well put together pamphlet that is the blueprint for the 3 L's, the leads, listing, leverage, and examples of how to do them. So examples of how to do better open house, lead conversion, lead generation, all the things that are a part of our model, the leads, listings, leverage, it's all in here, which I thought would be a great cheat sheet for you guys. So I'll give that to you guys when we're done as well. No, it's okay. Well,
the battery was working right before we.
It's Murphy's Law. Yeah. So I'll go through some of the fix that. So one of the things Gary Keller says in the shift is when the market has shifted, the market is tough, but opportunity is still awesome. Interestingly, so I've been in real estate for how long? 22 years, right? 22 years. And so I was in the shifted market when the mortgage meltdown occurred, right? And during that time, or at least up to that time, I had never done a foreclosure, distressed property, short sale at all. Like there was no need to do that. I was kind of just on autopilot doing my thing. But when the market crashed, it forced me to do something entirely different, to learn a new skill set. I had to, otherwise I wouldn't survive. I had so many listings that at the time just turning over and like no problem, autopilot. And then suddenly the market crashed and I was left with, I think I had like 35 listings that weren't moving at all. And people were canceling on me, and it was like my fault that I couldn't sell or move these properties, so I had to get creative. Understanding short sales was one of them. Understanding marketing, and like I said, doing things differently versus how you're doing things before completely changed everything. So we'll go over some of that too. The law of supply and demand. So it's really important. You guys have probably heard me say this many times before, but there's a difference between the seller's market and the buyer's market, and there's actually a formula for it. So it's not so much to say, yeah, we're in a seller's market, or yeah, we're in a buyer's market, but there's a calculation on how to get there. So what's that calculation? It's based on the number of months of inventory. So some of your new agents, it's really important to get a handle on what that looks like. Literally, I look at it every week. You don't have to look at it that frequently, probably every other week, maybe. Once a month is like bare minimum what you should be looking at, because it's going to tell you if the market's heading in one direction or another. So how you get to this formula is if you take the average number of sales in a market every single month and you don't add anything new, how many months would it take to exhaust that inventory? Does that make sense? So you take the average number of sales that you have in a given market, and without adding any new inventory to it, how many months would it take to exhaust that existing inventory? So as an example, if on average a market closes 1,500 sales each month, how many months of inventory would it take to if you had 3,000 sales per month or 3,000 new homes listed at 1,500, it would take you 2 months. That would be 2 months of inventory as an example. So the formula, that scale is 5 months or less of inventory is a seller's market. 6 months is kind of considered a neutral market, and 7 months or more is a buyer's market. You guys ever see like those shows, those real estate shows where they'll go in and they're like, 400,000 for this home, I'll take the RV in the back, and like doing all those kind of things. That's a heavy buyer's market. And so how much you can get away with that depends on how many months of inventory there is. One of the states that I'm licensed in as well as Arizona. And in Arizona, there was a time in the town that I used to live in. I say town, there's like 50,000 people there. In the town I used to live in, there were some brand new homes that had about anywhere between 30 to 40 months of inventory. 30 or 40 months. The homes were unbelievably gorgeous, well built, sitting completely empty. And you could walk into a new builder and be like, yeah, I know you want 600,000 for this thing, but would you take 350? Like you can literally kind of, negotiate because it's been sitting on the market for so long. Whereas here, what happens here with new construction? It's a pile of dirt and there's like 50 people in line to buy this pile of dirt. Then there's like lotto and there's it's a whole thing, right? That's good though. It shows you, what the demand is. So understanding the supply and demand, if it's a seller's market or a buyer's market, is super important. The other thing that's really important too is to be the local economist of choice. So you can understand what's happening on Oahu as an island, but that's not necessarily what matters most to your specific client who's looking to buy in, Waianae or Makaha or Mililani or Kahala. It's going to be a little bit different. So it's a good idea to understand what's happening on the island, but you got to be hyper-focused on specific to what's happening in the area that you're serving your client. So some of the things we're talking about is perspective of the market, opportunity mindset, mastering your skills, installing key systems, getting the game. That's for tactic one. We'll fly through it, and feel free to stop me with any questions or ahas or things that you're doing that might work or not work. So in the book, and I'm so sorry that you guys didn't get a blueprint one for you, but in the book, it also talks about determining a buyer's market versus seller's market, talking about the months of inventory that we just went over. And then it talks about what causes a shift. So being interactive and participating, what do you guys think causes the shifting market? And is the shift a bad thing? Is it a good thing?
The interest.
Absolutely, that's a huge contributing factor to it, for sure. What else can cause a shifting market?
That was what was until now. It's not normal. Now it's normal.
The rates, you mean?
Everything.
Sure.
I mean, you 22 years in the real estate.
I'm only 25 years old.
Oh. Did you ever had 30 offers on your listing?
Yeah, I mean,
Since you start?
yes, but it's not consistent, right? It ebb and flows, which is kind of consistent with a shifting market. So yeah, I've had that before, but in another type of shift. Yeah.
Economic factors for that region or area.
Yeah. So there are some places in the mainland too where I think if you're in a town that neighbors a coal mine or a Walmart distribution center or whatever, and that business shuts down or relocates, that local market crashes. It's crazy. Like that can absolutely collapse a local market. We don't have that here. The reason why I bring it up too is if you guys are, if you practice only here, or you're new to real estate and just started here, you're kind of lucky. You're lucky in that we're not exposed to a lot of the things and problems that we have in the mainland, right? The mainland, and I say this all the time when I teach some of these classes, is when you can build for as far as your eye can see, like in Vegas or Colorado or Texas or whatever, your home is only worth so much for a certain amount of time. When the ball drops, in this case, rates go up or something else changes and causes a shift, now you have like 300 homes that are empty. And now the builder's like, oh. And it's not uncommon during a shift for builders, like big builders, to go bankrupt. Because they're on the hook, they've invested so much money to build these homes, and now they're selling it for pennies on the dollar. And what happens when they do that? The people who've already bought the homes, that are living in the homes, that just closed on them for 400,000, now everyone's selling it for 275, and now they're upside down. And that actually does happen, sadly. The good news in relation to Oahu is that doesn't happen. It doesn't happen here because we're on an island. So all the frustrations that you guys deal with the 30 offers that you receive, or when you're showing a property to a client, the client is not from here, right? And they're like, I know this property is 800,000, but what do you say we offer 625? You're like, okay, let me tell you how this works. All those kind of frustrations that we normally deal with is a good thing because values are always high. It's very robust here. Our market is super, super robust. So in the last shifting market, when the mortgage meltdown occurred, there are some cities and areas and markets that took 8 to 9 years to get back to the price points that it was prior to that mortgage meltdown. That's a long time. Anyone know what Hawaii's was?
6 months.
How many years, that would be great, but that's not, how many years did it take for Hawaii to rebound from the crash?
1 year?
2.5 years. It might seem like a long time. That is so quick to regain the position and equity that you were in, prior to that. It's unbelievable. It's one of the fastest in the country. So we're in good position. Over the last 40 years, what's the average appreciation in Hawaii?
5%.
5%, little over 5%. Doesn't sound sexy or exciting. Trust me, it's good. That's really good. Because there are some parts of the country, it's like on average, it's 1.5%, 2%. What you want to stay away from is the ones that boast about, listen, in the last 3 years, we've had 19%. I'm like, yeah, but what about 3 years prior to that? Don't worry about that. Just focus on the 19, because there's a huge ebb and flow, right? So Anna, who was here from San Francisco is bananas right now. People are paying like literally $500,000 over asking, waiving every single contingency, closing in like 7 days. Could you imagine? Bananas, right? But when the market crashes there, it is not good. There's so much ebb and flow in that area. Oakland is like that too. New York is like that too. So it's really important to get a grasp on not only what's happening nationally, but what's happening in other metropolitan areas, but really be the local area expert for what we're dealing with here. So interest rates absolutely can cause a shifting market. I think that COVID was a huge unknown, because when we started going into COVID in roughly March 2020, we didn't know. We were like, uh-oh, we might not sell a single house until this pandemic is over. But what we saw is people were reanalyzing their own lives and where they were, and like, you know what? And what happened was people were swapping. They didn't do it on purpose, but they were swapping lifestyles. People in the metropolitan area were like, let's go to the country, get a bigger home, and spend more time with family and live outdoors. And people outdoors were like, let's go to the city and do this thing, and let's fight for parking all the time and overpay for coffee. Like they literally just switched. And now what's happening is some people, not all, but some are like analyzing again, like, no, I think we want to switch back. That was fun. That was a fun experiment. Let's do that. Let's do that again and switch back. So that creates inventory, because people are like buying and selling, and they can do it because properties appreciated so much. When interest rates rise, people sometimes don't know why or how that happens and how it can impact. But one of the things, and Marie and I were talking about this the other day when we were doing a buyer seminar, when you guys are dealing with a buyer, you have to push the concept, because it's true, is you have to sell them on the payment, not on the purchase price. Sell the payment, not the price. And here's why, because when people are talking about the payment of a home, or rather the purchase price, they don't know what that means. They're not, especially if it's military, especially if it's someone who's like, I don't know how long I'm going to keep the home, maybe 5 years, 7 years, maybe 10 years. If that's the case, then $900,000 is not relevant, but that $4,500 payment is. That's super relevant. And in fact, one of the things that we would always do when I show property is, if my client wanted to see these 6 or 7 properties, I would have my lender do all the payments, the monthly payments for each of them. So when I would write it on there, right underneath the purchase price, it was $900,000, $950,000, $875,000, whatever the prices were. I'd have the monthly payments, principal, interest, tax, and insurance, and HOA on it, because they can't wrap their head. I mean, people think that they can, but they can't wrap their head around the purchase price. Even in a good market, they walk in there like, okay, $975,000. What does that even mean? But they absolutely can. We're like, 3,200. They're like, oh, okay, hold on now, 3,200. That's rotting for about a week. Like they can really take a better assessment of if they can afford it or not based on the monthly payment. So to make sure that you guys are really in tune with that. Interest rates are rising because the government kind of artificially stimulated and kept the interest rates low for so long. It has nowhere to go but up. So it is natural. It's not the end of the world. Gary Keller even said in one of our leadership calls too, is that rates, let's see, when I got in the market in real estate, the highest I've ever seen rates was about 8%, which I thought at that time was super, super high. Rates historically high, I think it was in the 18%-ish, right? I don't know if anyone was practicing that long, but yeah, it was up to that point. It's relative though. It's relative to the cost of homes. Home prices are not going to continue rising in some areas that we have here at 13 to 15% plus be at 18%. That's not going to happen. It kind of balances itself out to some extent. But rising interest rates are super important. That should be a motivating factor when you're talking to buyers to jump in or sellers to jump out. There's a little bit of uncertainty that you can use to your advantage when you're talking to clients to get them motivated. So what happens in a shifting market is people can't afford to buy. As affordability drops, the number of qualified buyers decline. Has anyone had that? Dealing with a ton of buyers and suddenly like, I have 17 buyers and suddenly you have 3. All the higher end, all cash. Everyone else is kind of put to the side. The decline in buyers means reduction in demand, which is true. So some of the homes that, there's some listings that have, like you said, 30 offers on it. Not really, not any. I mean, there's some depending on how it's priced, but not really. Some of the offers received is like 3 or 4. So again, not sky is falling, but it's changed, right? And also that you can tell, it's tangible and palatable that you can tell that the negotiation has changed a little bit. Before it was like, can I just change the light bulb out on the porch? And they're like, next, there's 15 other people in line. And now it's changed. Like buyers are actually really thinking about if they want to move forward or not. And this wasn't the case in the shift, but it was certainly the case prior to the shift. Is the number one reason that an escrow would cancel is as a result of the home inspection findings. The number one reason why an escrow would fall apart is because of the findings of the home inspection. That wasn't really the case during the pandemic because people were like, yeah, I know there's a big hole in the roof, but we like natural light. So we'll just, because we don't want to get back on the market and look for property again, right? So that's going to change. People get pickier. So well, I'm saying these kind of things is because you guys have to also think about strategy too. It's how, if you present and set up in your buyer consultations with people about what the homes are, what the deficiency in homes are, it's a much easier conversation. I don't know how many people do buyer consultations in here, but hopefully the answer is 100% because it's super, super important. But if you skip the buyer consultation, or, and I've seen this happen too for agents that are newer and they're super anxious and super excited to get that buyer. They're like, listen, Mr. Buyer, I'm gonna find you the dream home that you've always wanted. It's Hawaii, it's a paradise. We'll be in escrow in a week. It's gonna be amazing. And then you get to the home inspection. It's like, okay, there's 15 pages of things that are wrong with it, but it's so told. And then they're freaked out because the conversation that you had, you didn't set the table right for their expectations when they receive the home inspection report, right? You gotta have a really, really good buyer consultation to set that up so that you can minimize or reduce the number of cancellations that you're gonna have after home inspection. And it's easy to do. I have a script for that, right? Christine, we actually use it all the time. So the script for that is simple. It's I know that we're looking for different properties and we're gonna look for some that are older homes, some that are brand new. Just know that there's no cleanup bill of health on any property. There's always gonna be something wrong with it, whether it was built yesterday or whether it was built 30 years ago, there's gonna be something. The older it is, probably a longer list of things that are wrong with it. The newer it is, just a couple of items. And it's okay. It's okay. It's okay for this outlet not to work and that light switch not to work. And maybe to have a small leak over here, and maybe to have, it's on its last leg for the roof. All those things are okay. This process is for due diligence, so you know what we're dealing with. And if it's too much, we can cancel. We can ask for repairs or credits. Just know that this is an as-is market, meaning they don't have to fix anything if they don't want to. So the way I'm saying it, I'm not setting it up so that they're getting what they want. They're going, okay, this is serious. I understand now. So it's an easier conversation when you sit down and you have the home inspection and you're going through what they can deal with, what they can stomach. I kind of go, if they're a married couple, I'm like, hey, just a honey-do list. This is a project list now, right? And if it's something safety related or health issues or whatever, it's a black mold, yeah, get out of there for sure. But you want to set the tone the right way and you can minimize some of your cancellations. So there's something called an affordability. Let me switch to this. So there's something called an affordability index. And it basically is calculating the what people can afford to purchase based on the median income in a certain area, right? The lower the number is, the worse the gap is from median income to cost of living to homes being purchased and so forth. It's not something that you have to memorize, but it's something helpful to know. So I did the math for Honolulu already. The affordability in Honolulu is 74. The cost of living is 176. Basically, what that means is we're like the worst in the entire country. Guys, it's the cost of paradise, right? The cost of living is literally the highest in the entire country. Does that mean that being a real estate agent in Hawaii is a bad thing? No. You just have to, it changes what your scripting is. It changes how you're delivering some of the messages, right? Because if you were an agent in Nashville or Oklahoma or Alabama, your conversation is different. For better or worse, it's completely different. When I was in Arizona, the average home at that time, I mean, homes were selling for anywhere from $80,000 up to $300 was kind of high, to be quite honest with you, right? So it's a different market. But the scripting that I had then was, if I had someone that wanted to use a USDA loan, an FHA loan, or a VA loan, my conversation was, awesome. James, listen, by the time that you decide to sell in 2 or 3 years, you may or may not be able to sell it for what we're buying it for. Is that okay with you? Different conversation, right? And in that case, in that state, in that market, they didn't really mind as much, because if he's spending $80,000 on a home, he's like, whatever. It's cheaper to buy than it is to rent in some cases, right? Here, it's totally different. Totally different. So that part's important. But cost of living is super, super high. How that changes your dialogue and how you're dealing with your demographic and your buyers is you're dealing with family members that are purchasing together. You might want to be creative and look at homes that are approved for in-law suites or these kind of things that can have some rental income. If there's any possibility of multi-family homes, you can offset that with some of the income that you gain, the rental income. So you want to look at those kind of things too, and that would help gauge what you're looking for affordability. It goes into a whole, hey, Carrie, can you see if you can get this one? Before I throw it somewhere. So what impacts affordability and availability for homes is macro. Macro is economic growth, inflation, interest rates. Metro is population, employment, household income. And then local is the micro that we're talking about, the micro economists of choice. Neighborhood dynamics, property conditions, and home prices. So those are the things that are super, super important to know. There's a formula for that. You don't need to know all those things. But here's one thing that's interesting is I read you that the introduction for the shift, and Gary specifically mentioned that during a shift, it's real, where people lose their jobs, people get laid off, all these things and how to be prepared. I don't know if you guys know this, the shift was written in 2009. It was written as a result of, in response to the mortgage meltdown. But it is exactly what's happening right now. It's still applicable. Every shifting market has the same thing. So while other companies, whether it's real estate related or not, but especially real estate related, they're trying to pivot and figure out what we're gonna do, how we're gonna do this thing as the market changes. We already wrote the book on it. Just follow this. It's already written. That's exactly why we teach these kind of classes about them. The blueprint is already there. Follow the blueprint. So of all the economic indicators that you can look at, there is a couple of them that I wanted to point out, which I think is really important. This is my opinion, but the number one economic indicator that I look at that means everything is consumer confidence. That's a score. And consumer confidence is important because no matter what's going on with interest rates or home sales or inflation or anything like that at all, consumer confidence can either push right through it and be totally fine, or it can contribute to crashing everything. So consumer confidence is super important. Another stat that people, I'm sure you guys have heard this, like, is another meltdown coming? Or is what happened in 2009, is that going to happen now? What do you guys think? Robert, you're shaking your head. What do you think?
I don't think so.
Why don't you think so?
The other indicators in the economy are still pretty strong. So I think prices are going to cool, but I don't think they're going to crash, especially here in White.
Anyone else?
I think it just depends on where you're at.
It's true. Yeah. Anyone else? Maria?
But nationally, probably not to the same level.
Well, the one good thing, there's always there's similar crashes, but there's for different reasons, and government kind of puts up some safeguards for better or worse. Why it won't look like the last meltdown was the meltdown was because too many people that didn't qualify for loans were given loans. And it was so rampant that people that had no, and I'll tell you personal stories later, but there's so many people that had no business owning a property had stated income loans in 5 different properties. And I'm like, they had more properties than I had. I was working. And I had people that had like 5 properties, but it didn't show income whatsoever, had bad credit. I'm like, this is not a good sign, right? Those things have closed, like those loans don't exist anymore in the abundance that it did once before. There's a little bit of that, not much, not so that it would shake the economy. And some of the other economic indicators that you mentioned too is very, very strong. Like we have the most wealth in properties right now than ever before. So that's good, right? But here's one that you have to keep your eye on that's not good, is consumer debt is the highest it's been on record. And so there's always something to look at. And I don't know what that means because it's never happened before. But that's one where I can see, I also do mortgages, or I used to in my past life do mortgages. And so that's one of those things that is kind of a red flag. Because if people have too much consumer debt, how are they going to resolve the debt? They might be like, hey, I got this great 2.5%, 3% low rate mortgage. That's great, but what if you have this other 25% interest on a credit card that's looming and the collection guy is calling you and you can't make that payment? Something's going to give. Either your credit scores are going to crash, you're going to file bankruptcy, which is going to be a little bit of a domino effect on other debt that you might have, or you're going to now be forced to pull money out of the equity of the home. And if your credit score is impacted, you can't get a second mortgage or a HELOC, which means then that you got to refinance your awesome 2.5% rate to get a 7% rate, which still makes sense because it's still paying off an 18 to 25% rate, but you're not happy about it because your payment just went through the roof. But it's just, there's a chain reaction. So it's something, I don't know what it means, but it's something to really keep an eye on.
But isn't that what the government wants? Because our number one GDP is debt.
Yeah, absolutely. But when it's the highest on record, now the good news is it coincides with the highest wealth on record too. There's a correlation to that, so it might work itself out. But when you throw that mix in with layoffs, that's the thing that you have to, I don't know, you have to be aware of. I say this because, like I said, being the local economist of choice, you should know these things. You know those stupid videos that I send you guys constantly? Trust me, I hate those videos, but I send it to you for talking points so that you guys know what you can tell your clients so that you appear to be like the economist of choice. It's all those things that are economic indicators that relate to what we're doing. And some have a direct correlation, some may not. Okay. One thing that I highlighted here, the media works overtime to make certain you have an opinion on the state of the housing market. It's so funny because I'm reading news constantly, especially to prepare for these kind of things or help you guys. Everything is like the economy's going to crash, real estate's going to crash, home prices are down. It's like nonstop.
But it comes from the news.
It comes from the news. So
They put fear in people.
Yeah.
And we need to fix that. That's what I feel.
100%. So is some of it real? I would say some of it is real, but it's not the hyperbole that they make it sound like. I mean, what the media's job is for you to click on this link here so you can read. That's what their job is. So they give you the headline that just sounds like, oh my God, my job's in jeopardy. And you click on it. Or you look at the numbers. That's why I say be local economist of choice. Know your numbers. If you know your numbers, then you'll realize like our market specifically is pretty good. It might have slowed down a little bit. It's pretty good. So take it with a grain of salt for what you're reading. You can always chat with me. That'd be always great. Don't disregard the media. In fact, pay attention to what's being said, but listen cautiously and critically. Read and listen to a variety of expert opinions, collect motivational articles, and validate your position, and you'll be better poised to counter any objections your buyer and sellers may have. In fact, you don't have to educate your consumer as much about a shifting market because of the media. You just need to point out what the opportunities are. So if someone comes in and is like, I heard the prices are falling, what would be a counter for that is to understand what their needs are. Are you looking to buy something at a discount? Because we can look at distressed properties or some foreclosures that might show. I mean, you've got to have like the objection handler to what they're looking at in the media. And so what it's saying is understand what the media is saying, because you want to know what you want to know what you're up against, right? A lot of clients will do that, especially when the market is shifting. They think that it's suddenly a swap meet. And anything that you say, they're going to want to have a discount, right? One good stat, by the way, when you are educating someone on a buyer consultation, which is one of my favorite things ever, is a sales price to list price ratio. And not only the island, like fine tune that to the area that they're looking at. Because if they're looking in Huacalay, do you know what Huacalay is right now? I'm going to guess, but I think it's probably 106.
Yeah, it's probably up there.
106 and a half or something like that. So if I have a buyer that's buying, I pointed to him because he lives in Huacalay, but if you have you too. If you have a buyer in the Huacalay area, right, and they're like, hey, I really want to get a good deal. Absolutely, I want you to get a good deal too. Sometimes the best deal is getting accepted on the property, because that way you're now on the train of appreciation. With that being said, it's about 106.5%. So if you're okay with paying 6.5% over to get an accepted offer, absolutely, I got you. Start looking right away. You got to have that kind of scripting and dialogue ready to go.
Chad, real quick, what about non-traditional lending, like
Portfolio hard money.
DSCR loans?
Well, what about them?
So, like you were talking about in the past, right? Before the market crash, people shouldn't own property, but in this case, they don't have to qualify based on income with a DSCR loan, right? It's based on the rental income, gross rental income.
Yeah. So there are different types of loans that are different qualifiers. There's some private money or portfolio loans or investment loans that qualify the property itself. No problem. That's if you qualify for it, that's great. There's always restrictions to things though, right? So my personal opinion is those opportunities will dry up from the lending side of it because their cost of money is going to change. So a risk for the lender to lend that kind of money out becomes far more palatable when the appreciation, because they're putting a lien on the property. So their risk is much lower. When the market is coming down and interest rates are going up, they're going to go, I don't know. So one of the things that I used to do while I was in California was I would pool money together with other investors and we would lend money out as a hard money loan. You guys have heard of like portfolio loans or private money. So we were basically like the bank. And so we made up all the rules. So the loans that we would give out would be anywhere from, if they have really, really good credit, it was an easy deal, like 50% loan to value, we would lend it out maybe 8-9%. If they had horrible credit, 70% loan to value, we would be at like 18%. Because it's all based on risk. Or sometimes I'd be like, nah, I don't want to do it. It's too close to a weird neighborhood, or there's too many cars we literally would do that. There's too many cars in the garage. Like there's weird things, but we can make the rules because we're the lender.
Yeah.
So those kinds of non-traditional loans will change depending on the market. You know what else will come up? Thank you for bringing that up because it reminded me is, you guys ever hear of people calling, hey, do you have like owner financing? Like, do you have any lease options or lease to own? Those things will show up. Those things are market condition driven. So in the mainland, if you guys have ever gone on a road trip in the mainland, you guys ever see a billboard that says like $5,500 per acre, owner will finance or something like that. I don't want to say it's a scam, but it's very close to being a scam. It's not a scam, but here's what it is. It's called an agreement of sale. You guys know what that is? Have you heard of that before? An agreement of sale is you enter into a contract, you put some down payment, and the seller will finance the rest but title doesn't transfer until you make your final and last payment.
Is that also called a subject to?
Can be. It can be subject to, yeah. Subject to the last payment being made and whatever the terms being satisfied. So sale. It does happen and it will happen again here. So be prepared for people to call you and ask you for that. And the reason why would they do that is because when it shifts to a buyer's market, now the buyers are in control again. In a seller's market where we've been for a while, it's like if someone goes, hey, will the seller finance? You're like, 18 people with cash behind you, why would the seller finance, right? It's gonna change, especially if something sits on the market for a while. The condition of a market does not have to equal the condition of your business. That's a Gary Keller saying I thought was brilliant. The market is a market. Agents succeed in all markets, buyer, seller, or neutral markets. And as I discussed before, you got to change the strategy during the shift. So in the shift, or prior to the shift of this pandemic and prior to that, what we've been dealing with is first-time home buyers, military buyers, people upsizing. So being, mastermind and participating, what do you think? Should I do I gotta keep moving it or something?
I think you just said.
What kind of buyers, who's a new demographic, buyers and sellers in a shifting market? If we dealt with first-time home buyers, military buyers, people that are upsizing, who's your clients right now? Before it shifted, last 3-4 years, especially the last 2, who were some of the people you're serving? Investors certainly, right? People want to flip. Who else? That's it.
Boomers, downsizing.
Yeah. Well,
Second home buyers.
yeah. Oh, perfect. Yeah, because money's cheap. It's like, why not? Who else?
Yes,
What's that?
millennials.
Yeah, millennials. What's the younger generation? Is it Z? X? Z?
We're at.
We're X's. Don't let me in. You don't know where I'm at. I said I'm 25. You don't know me yet. So what is it going to go to? When the market shifts now, are we still going to have first-time home buyers? We will, but it's going to change, right? It's going to be a more sophisticated first-time home buyer. Whereas before, we might have a first-time home buyer that has barely or no money down. It's going to shift to someone that probably does, or someone that's going to get help from dad or mom. And what does that look like? That means that there's going to be gift funds letters, right? So you got to understand what that is and how that can be worked. There's certain loan programs that allow for it, certain ones that don't. There's certain caps on that. You're going to have to source that. And that's not your job. You're not the lender, but you got to get ahead of it, because if you're not setting them up the right way in that conversation, oh, mom's going to give you $50,000. No problem. Where is that money sitting? It's in her checking account. Just let her know. Just letting you know so you can let her know. We're going to need a copy of her bank statements too for the lender. So just be prepared for that. You know what I mean? It can't be in a safe or under someone's mattress. Just trust me. I've seen that. Yeah, it has to be seasoned. So who else are we going to go into in terms of demographic? Think about it. We're going to be in a shifting market. Prices might normalize. Who's going to be our demographic?
I'm getting a lot of FOMO, guys who miss the rates. So they think the rates are gonna go higher. So a lot of them are starting to move in because they felt like, gosh, I just missed it. I don't miss it.
So you're getting a lot of buyers that are more motivated because they're for fear of the rates going even higher. That's great. That's actually a great opportunity to call your database and say, yeah, I know rates have gone up, but if you're interested in building wealth, which is property ownership, home ownership. You guys know there's a statistic. Did I say this at your thing? I might have, but it's one of my favorite ones is In the last 200 years, 90% of millionaires made their wealth in real estate. 90% of millionaires made their wealth in real estate. Real estate is absolutely the vehicle for wealth building. I'm not saying you can't build wealth elsewhere, but it's like, that's like a no-brainer. So that's a good one to use when you're making your care calls to everyone and saying, hey, I know we didn't close on the home when it was 3.5%, but let's say we get in sooner right now. You know? It's a good one. Investors are always available. Now, as rates start coming up, as prices start to normalize and come down, they'll show up as well. So don't discount that. But guys, how about short sales? Short sales and foreclosures, they're gonna circle around, right? I've told this to some of you. What I would absolutely recommend that you do is call your favorite title or escrow company, ask them to pull a report on USDA, FHA, VA that closed in the last 2.5, 3 years. You get that list and start prospecting that list.
I did that for a lien foreclosure. I got 4 screaming calls.
How dare you call me?
No, how dare you send me a letter that I don't have any lien, any foreclosure, nothing.
Oh, well, so that's not what I'm talking about. What you sent was a letter that said you have a foreclosure and I want to help you.
And pre-lien and foreclosure, pre-lien.
Where did you get that list
So
from?
either they didn't pay G tax or, all kinds of. I
people-
got it from the escrow company.
I know
I mean, I paid for the list, so.
Yeah.
And then I said, can you please check if it's accurate? Or,
there's like pre-foreclosure.
yes,
And like a lot of places have that because it goes on, foreclosure, even when you have like one missed payment, which like some people don't even notice, but then when they make that, so it's not like very accurate. I heard.
I didn't know, now I
Unless it's
know.
like, yeah, because it's like so many properties you'll see, you're like, what? Where are
So
we?
do you guys know what the rule is? How many days you have to be late to be defaulted?
Mm.
90. 90 days to be defaulted. How many days until you're entering into foreclosure? Not to say you can't unwind it, but enter foreclosure what? It's 120. Yeah. So just know that that's the threshold. And people will, especially now when, money is getting tighter and people might be experiencing layoffs, like you might have people dipping into the pre-foreclosure, but they're not, they can unwind it. They're going to be this is what happened before. They're going to teeter on the line of like, I'm defaulted, I'm not, I got caught up, I'm defaulted, I'm going to have a payment plan. I've caught up now, it's this kind of thing. And then you're going to see like loan mods pop back up again. A loan modification is where they take the balance if someone's heavily behind and they roll it into the balance of the loan or change the payment. But what I was going to say was, if you had a list, so not people that are behind, but a list of people that used low down payment or no down payment loan programs, because those people might have to move for a variety of reasons. Maybe they got to downsize. If they're military, they got to PCS out. So, normal stay for military is about 3 years. Sometimes they can get it extended, but generally speaking, it's 3 years. So I would ask for a list of everyone who used like a VA loan in the last 2 years. FHA, USDA, you can also look at the last couple of years, because if they have to sell, they may not have enough equity in that home to pay commissions, closing costs, GE in some cases, or HARPTA in other cases. So it just depends, right? But that's a great list to start off at. That's a different demographic.
I think you can search it in real list also.
You absolutely can. Yeah. We had that short sale class not that long ago where they gave some really good tips, right? You remember, Carrie, what it was? It was like they said to call, there's a government office that's not busy yet because foreclosure rates are still very low. But he recommended calling them and befriending the short sale distressed property counselors, because some of these programs, you have to go through these counselors to get approved for these types of government assistance. Befriending them, maybe take them out to lunch, send them a gift basket or whatever. And the purpose of that, that's the longest roll ever. And the purpose of that would be when it does pick up and there is foreclosures and short sales, that you're already ahead of the game. Like you already have that relationship, and that person be like, yeah, I'm gonna send it over to you. Yeah. I'll let you handle that.
If you guys needed to, that should be on the Google Classroom, plus also the YouTube channel, right?
Thank you
Mastermind.
for marketing the Google Classroom. We have all our videos like this on Google Classroom, so please look. When the market shifts up, both reactive and proactive lead generation techniques work. When the market shifts down, proactive is where you have to go. That's so important. We were talking about that before. Reactive and proactive, super different. I would consider that passive and active lead generation, right? Passive lead generation is when I post something on Facebook or on Instagram or whatever, and I'm like, okay, I did my lead gen for the day. Trust me, agents do it all the time. I did my lead gen and I'm all done. No, I have like there's like 100 views, a couple of likes or whatever. That doesn't do anything. Like you can do that all day long, but that's not engaging with people. You can do that in addition to. So in a market that we just came out of where everything is completely bananas, you can get away with that. You can cheat the system and still make money and think that it works. But when the market is shifting, you absolutely have to pick up the phone. You have to get in front of people. You have to door knock. You have to do the things. By the way, here's the good news: it didn't cost you anything at all. It didn't cost you anything. But you just have to do that hard work, right? Make no mistakes. When the market shifts, new strategies are required. Here are some of the tactics that they mentioned in some of your new strategies. Shift the mindset to one of opportunity. Which, for instance, if you guys have never done a short sale before, we have short sale classes. Take a short sale class. That's like set yourself up for the opportunity that's around the corner. Identify and go after the motivated buyers and sellers. So what does that mean? That means that if you have a client that you've been working with that was maxed out, when the rates were 2.75, they were maxed out at 600,000, which is basically, it's a townhome or condo, right? They're maxed out at 600,000. And now their rates have gone up. They don't really qualify. There's nothing, there's no inventory. Keep in touch with them on a drip campaign. Don't spend your time and energy with them. Don't show them properly. Don't go, because you're ruining their own motivation as well. There's nothing that's available for them, and you're spending time in the wrong place. You got to focus on the motivated. You have to focus on those who actually qualify. Otherwise, you're just going to run out of energy. Price properties ahead of the market. Don't chase the market. So what that means is, if you guys see, there's a lot of agents that have been tricked to think that, man, they are so good at pricing home because they put it on and it sells in a day. It's not them. It's the market. And now that the market is changing a little bit, you can tell because now we're seeing price reductions. Now we're seeing things sitting on the market a lot longer. So pricing ahead of the market means really analyzing and doing the math and figuring out where comps are and finding out what has sold in that neighborhood. And if that's shrinking, it doesn't mean you can't price it higher than like the last sale, but you got to be reasonable for what percentage higher than the last sale. Because before people were pricing things like 10%, 10% in some areas, right? If it's not 10%, it's 5%. Save yourself the trouble. Just price it the right way going forward. Price it to the market that we're going into. Stand out from the competition by getting properties in great condition. So that's the same as a buyer consultation and listing presentation. You're going to be talking to them about how does your property stand out? How can we make sure that people see this property and want to buy it? One of the things that I did in the last shifting market was I created something, and I have it already. So if this is going to come back and you guys can absolutely use it. It is something called a Keller certified home. And so what I did was, and that example I gave you when I had like 35 plus listings in the last shift, and the market crashed and I was stuck with 35 listings. And people were calling me and yelling at me. You were so stupid. Why did I list with you? Why can't you sell my home? And I literally remembered I walked on one of the streets. I went to go pick up a sign. And like I'm discussing with myself, like I gotta go pick up a sign, and I basically got fired, right? I'm looking down the street, and I swear to God, every single home down the street had a sign on it. And I was looking, and I'm like seeing signs and signs, and I'm like, how do I make myself stand out? And I was thinking of silly things. Don't ever do these things. But I was thinking of like, put like a fluorescent light or a spotlight, or every time someone walks by, it was like glitter bomb. I'm like, what do I do to stand out, right? And so I thought of, when you guys go to like a car dealership and you're buying a used car, there's the used car lot, and then there's a certified used car that has like the 180-point inspection and extra warranty that comes with, and I know it's priced a little more, but this is a risk. I don't know what I'm getting over here, but this one, the mechanics looked at it. It's like all these things, right? So I created something called a certified home. And what that certified home is, I've already done the inspection. I've already ordered prelim. If there's HOA, I've already ordered the condo docs. I'm giving the buyer a home warranty at closing. I already have an appraisal done. Pre-listing inspection is already done. All these things are done. And then I give the buyer a guarantee. What that guarantee means is, if you're not happy with this home in 12 months, I'll list it for you for free. I'm not saying that on the buy side, I'm listing my side. Because now I've gained the client that's not even my client. It's not my buyer, it's the other guy's buyer. But I'm saying I'm giving you this satisfaction guarantee. And so I have these signs, right? There's a rider on top that says Keller certified home. Then it's your rider. And underneath it has all these things that we've done. Check, 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 check. And so when people would come, so that's how I stood out. When people would come into mine, they were like, okay, so what'd you guys take? I'm like, oh, we already did. You don't even need to negotiate. We already have everything right here. Here you go. Here's the appraisal. Here's this. Here's that. Here's this. Here's this. They're like, oh.
And you paid for it.
No, I had the sellers pay for it. I didn't pay for anything. The sellers paid for all of it. But there's a script to that. So I told the seller, they said, how much is it going to cost me? I said, it's probably in total anywhere from $700 to $800. But here's the thing. Some of it you pay at the end, like the home warranty, you pay when you close. But the inspection, you got to pay up front. But that saves you. So one of the easiest ways to get sued is non-disclosure. That's one of the easiest ways for a seller to get sued is non-disclosure. So we're gonna have pre-inspection. We're gonna have it all listed out to protect you. So that's one. The other thing is an appraisal. I've already worked out a deal with a couple of local appraisers. They're not gonna charge you what they charge the banks. I have a special deal. So what they charge the banks is $800 to $1,000, but they're gonna charge you $300. But what it does is it shows a licensed certified appraiser what the value is, so that we can look at that and add that to the whole packet. We're going to offer a home warranty. Why would we offer a home warranty? Because we already know what's wrong with the property. We just did the home inspection. So we have a home warranty so that we're saving you the cost of negotiating a repair or credit. Buyer, you don't repair or credit. I'm going to give you a home warranty. You can fix that later after we close. So that $700, $800 that they're going to spend, I'm selling them, they could save potential thousands of dollars in all this negotiation back and forth. And more importantly, your property stands out from all the rest. So I don't know if you guys realize this, but in kind of mid 2019, we were already headed into a shifting market. This is pre-COVID. We were already headed into a shifting market. Days on market was starting to extend out. Sales price to list price ratio was starting to shrink. Prices were starting to come down and normalize a little bit then. And then COVID happened and it was like bananas, right? But I started using this program and I called it Keller Certified Home. And we stood out. We had everything that we put on there sold like hotcakes. So when I say that you got to change your tactic and change your strategy, that wouldn't work during COVID. Why would I even have that? People would be like, why would I pick? There's like people who would, fight over each other to overpay on my property. Why would you don't need it? It's relative to the market that's happening right now. So we have that program in place. I can do a different thing on it, but just to give you an example, you got to be thinking ahead. You got to be thinking of the market that we're heading into. Motivate buyers with a sense of urgency. Galen mentioned a good one on that. Qualify and convert leads quickly, get them to the table. Catch leads in your internet web. Bulletproof your transactions to make sure that you don't have any fallout. Find out where the market is and get it in it. Do more with less. So some of the things that we're going to talk about too is cutting expenses. In a downshift, it's all hands on deck. Agents must get back to prospecting, treat every lead as precious, convert leads to appointments and contracts, negotiate, follow up, manage transactions all the way to close, and provide top-notch service. You know what realtors don't have a lead problem. If you guys look in your own databases, which if you guys say I don't have a CRM and I don't use a database, if you pull your phone out, that is a database. So if you have hundreds or even thousands of people in your database, I'm certain that you have past clients, you have friends and family that care about you, that are in your sphere. Agents don't have a lead problem, they have a follow-up problem. They don't communicate with their database. You've got to do it. One of the things, I was on a call with Gary Keller, one of the things that he had mentioned, which I thought was brilliant, is a lot of agents have bad businesses in a good market. And so what COVID did was it allowed them to have a bad or poorly ran business, but in a very good market. So it tricked them into thinking, I'm really good. I'm a good agent, right? In a shifting market, all of that will be exposed. I want to say, I was looking at some of my notes. in preparation for this. And this was a class that I did with KW like 5 years ago. And at that time, I pulled up my slides. And at that time I said, guys, can you imagine NAR has a total of, like, at the time it was like 900 something thousand agents. So nationally we have like 900,000 agents, right? So I was giving that stat. You guys know what it is right now? It's like 1.6, 1.7 million. So 5 years ago, I was like, oh my God, this is a record number, 900 something thousand agents. Right now it's like 1.6. 1.6 million agents. We're gonna lose about 35% of them. 35, 40%. For better or worse, we're gonna lose them. And I do not want to lose any single person that's in this room, and I don't want to lose anyone that's in this firm. And the only way that you can shore that up is by looking at your own business. And some of that is cutting your own personal expenses. Some of that is cutting business expenses. It's getting rid of the things that you don't need, right? So some of you pay for lead generation, which is fine, but you have to analyze your return on investment. You have to. One of the things Gary Keller says is if you're not getting at least 3 times a return on investment, cut that out. Because there are other things that you can do that's either free or cheaper. Or personal expenses. I don't know if you guys do. Do you guys do budgeting on your own for your own personal expenses? I was looking through most of the stuff is my wife's Amazon spending. But you gotta go through and kind of analyze your own budgets and cut things, right? Like it's so funny. We cut our cable not that long ago. I'm like, oh my God, we spent so much on cable. We spend twice as much on every other service now that's on the internet that's not cable. I swear to God, I have like Hulu and Netflix and HBO and I have everything. It's crazy. So we have to cut all these kind of things. Like the little things actually do, add up. So you got to analyze that. Do you guys do a P&L? Do you? It's good.
My accountant says.
But you should, your accountant, that's fine, but you should know it. You should know what you spend. In the MREA, there's a model. It's a 30-30-40 model. It's what you should be spending on cost of sale, what you should be spending on lead generation, what you should be earning on profits. And that model is very specific because if you intend on having a long lasting and profitable business, you have to stick within this model. Because a lot of I will tell you, without mentioning names, there's a lot of high producing agents that not only in this office, but also in our market. And you would think you'd look and go, oh my God, they do so much. They did how many hundreds of transactions they do? And when you look at the P&L, it's like, ooh, that's not good at all. Because they're not watching. It tricks you into thinking like, I'm closing this many transactions, so I'm doing fine. You have to stay within a certain model and a certain budget, and we do help you with that. So Christy does P&L classes too. So if you guys don't have a P&L, I highly recommend that you sign up for one of our classes or a one-on-one. She'll sit with you one-on-one and help you with that P&L. If you guys, and I've given this like little tip before, is I don't know what software you guys use. If you use a software, I use something called RealtyXam. It's built for realtors, and you can get real like in the nitty-gritty with it, which I love. If you have a listing, you can put the day that you got the listing and all the expenses attached to that listing. Because sometimes people, if you're a listing agent, you go, oh, I got 3% on this, I'm doing great. You got 3% gross. But when you start adding in the photography, the marketing, the postcards, the mailing, all the things in there, and it'll attach it to that listing, it comes out with, oh, you actually grossed more like 1% or 1.25%. And then you have your splits, and then you have the cost, and then you have, so it forces you to reanalyze your business to go, I gotta charge a little bit more to make it worth my while. Or you know what? The postcards didn't have that ROI of 3% or 3 times what I need it to be. I'm gonna cut that expense out. Or you know what? I just realized that my photographer charged me quite a bit. I'm gonna see if I can negotiate with him because I send him so much business, or maybe I gotta look for another. Like those are the things that you need to do in a shifting market. Because every dollar counts, right? You gotta add it up. When you look at your calendar, so one of the things Gary talks about in a shifting market is assessing your skills. When you look at your calendar, does your schedule reflect what your goals are? I talk to agents all the time and they're like, man, this is my year. This year I'm gonna make whatever, 300,000, 500,000. We'll close 100 transactions. We'll close 50 transactions, whatever. I go, let me see your calendar. There's nothing on their calendar that would lead anyone to believe that that's the goal. There's no classes, there's no trainings, there's no lead generation, there's none of that. So you can want all you want, but it's not gonna materialize into anything unless you put action to it. So the first thing that I would tell anyone is if you have a goal of whatever that is, X amount of listings, X amount of buyers, whatever it is, your calendar has to reflect that. It absolutely does, otherwise you're not hitting I'll promise you right now, you're not hitting your goals. In a market that we just came out of, it's again, very easy to be lulled to sleep with, yeah, I made, oh my gosh, I made $200,000 for the first time ever in my career. That's amazing, that's awesome. I promise you, you will not do that again in a shifting market unless you become very purposeful. So while you don't want to look when the damage is done, you kind of want to plan ahead for this, right? Making sure that your lead gen's in there, that's got to be done. In the shift, it says, who does lead, honestly, no judgment. Who does lead gen here? Every day? Yeah. How many hours a day do you do lead gen?
I do it, it varies, but the minimum is 4, sometimes 6.
Hours?
Yeah.
Wow.
But that includes the database loading of
Sure.
what I just
Okay.
manage slow with that.
Okay.
So, trying to get more productive where it's less hours. better system.
Okay. Maria, how many hours? 2 hours a day? Because you have a team. So do you do it as a team?
We do as a team once a week, individually, every day, 2 hours.
And what do you call it when you do it as a team? I love this.
Prospecting clinic.
Prospecting clinic as a team. That's pretty cool. So is there some synergy that you find happens when you do it as a team? Like do they learn
Yeah.
from each other as a result of that?
Yeah, there's like a crackle in the room, everyone's hearing, they're excited, they're learning from each other, they learn from me.
Yeah. Do you invite guests every now and again to join,
I do.
to participate in that crackle?
Yeah.
And has that helped too?
You know what, it makes them believers, because there's something to be said about hearing something from that one person all the time, and then now I heard from Carrie, and it's like, oh, Carrie's doing it too.
It's like reinforced, right? Who else does lead gen on a regular basis? How many hours of lead gen do you do?
So it depends, because sometimes there is clients that they just love to talk, really.
Sure.
And I'm trying to,
Yeah, I gotta go.
yes, and they just, and so it's sometimes 2 hours and sometimes it goes to even 4 hours. But it doesn't mean that I call so many people. Like I said, it depends on the
Yeah.
time of each conversation with this client.
Sure.
And again, I found out that most of the people, they like to talk.
Yeah.
And only the busy one, like, oh yeah, okay, we're gonna talk, like they're busy.
Right.
But, I'm trying to learn that also. How
Yes.
to cut the conversation in the right way, that they're not gonna get offended or
Yeah.
feel abandoned in any way.
That's a bit of a skill set, right? When you communicate, to be able to like, thank you,
Yeah.
Marge, thank you. It's always a Marge. Thank you so much, Marge. I'm so glad that your grandkids are doing amazing. I'm gonna circle back to you. I'll call. Can I call you next month? I'll check on you next month. I'll see how little Bradley's doing. Do you lead gen, Tim? No? Oh my gosh, can you imagine if you would start lead gen? It's crazy. Most lead gens on a regular basis.
Well, I shouldn't say no. It's
Sporadic.
sporadic.
Is it in your calendar?
No, it's not in
Okay.
that calendar, so I say no for that, but everywhere I go, I would talk to people.
Yeah.
So I mean,
So long as you're purposeful, right? So it's not as though you have to sit in front of a phone and dial until your fingers get chapped. You got to have real estate conversations that with the intention of getting a new client, not just like, hey mom, so listen, do you like, what kind of curtains do you like? That's not a real estate conversation unless your mom's a potential buyer or seller. Like you got to get in that conversation of making something happen with your business. In all honesty, it's got to be in your calendar too. So lead gen's got to be in there. Training has got to be in there for new skills, new classes, things that are going to move you and your business forward. And then looking at reports, you got to have that in your calendar too, at least once a week, maybe once every other week at minimum. To look, you guys use InfoSparks? InfoSparks is a great tool to get an understanding of what the market's doing, where it's headed. When you meet with people who achieve at a high level, you plug in and receive a certain amount of electricity they give off. Kind of serendipitous to what Maria just said. And one of the things that we always say too is success leaves clues. Success leaves clues. What does that mean? There are people that have been in the shifting market before that they're telling you, these are the things that I've done to get through the shift and thrive during. By the way, KW has grown. We've done more business in the shift than any other real estate company. So I say this, I don't hope that no one thinks that I'm saying like the sky. Maria hates when I even a hint of like the sky is falling kind of conversation. It is not that conversation. There's so much opportunity. But there's opportunity if you prepare for the opportunity. If you don't, and you're kind of like, yeah, whatever, my budget, you know, it's like lead gen. You're gonna absolutely feel it for sure. Since our slide are not working, there is a section in here that talks about a TMO. A TMO is a total market overview, and this is not something that we have available through our MLS or service here. But guys, I created it from scratch. I've had it. How many years have I had it now? 5.
Yeah.
Like I literally created it like that long ago, and I put it out I think twice a month. So here's what a total market overview is. And we'll send you this, but it kind of looks like this. So I copied it from this. And here's what it does. So you can look at all kinds of reports and data. What it does is it breaks up set price point segments. So in this case, and this is a little lower for our market, but as an example, it'll have 0 to 75,000. It tells you how many number of active homes are in that category. How many of them are pending? What's the percentage of pending rate? How many of them are expired? How many closings in the last 6 months? What's the average sales price of the homes in that category? What the sales price to list price ratio is in that category? What's the days on market in that category? So I gave you the headings. The headings are everything that we talk about already as a whole. So why does it matter if you're breaking it down in small sections? This is like in $25,000 increments. The reason why is because there are some segments that move much more efficiently than others. So if you're talking to a seller and they're like, yeah, you know, I'm thinking I'm selling it for 1.1. And you look at this report and you're like, listen, I know you want to sell it for 1.1, but we might get a lot of traction at, you know, 1.05. And it's because there's not enough listings in that bucket or bracket. Like it's very, very strategic. And now you become the market expert because no one has this tool. So that works for sellers. It also works for buyers. When people are like, yeah, I want to get a good deal. You can call, well, let's see. This segment is lagging. In this segment, in this particular bracket, the sales price to list price ratio is the lowest, which means that there's a deal to be had. Because when you look at this one segment has 93% sales price to list price ratio. Another one is 97.8, 99.5, 99.6. And it goes all the way up and it dips to 98%. So there's deals to be had when you start looking at it in very refined segments, refined groups, right? I have this, I send it out to everyone twice a month. If you guys need an explanation or a breakdown of it, let me know. I'll be happy to break it down for you further. But it's more important than ever in a shifting market. You absolutely have to lean into your tools and resources. Speaking of tools, you guys have heard of a 4-in-1 before, right? It's a tool that we have. Sticking with some of your goals, the 4-in-1 will help you do that. And there's something called a 15th protocol. What a 15th protocol is with KW, what that means is if on the 15th of the month, which is basically halfway through the month, and coincidentally, we're halfway through the year, so it's a good opportunity to look at it from that perspective too. If as of the 15th of the month, you haven't hit your goals, let's say your goal is to close 5 transactions in a month, and you close 1, right? And you're halfway through the month, you don't go, well, the 15th protocol is like, it forces you to have the mindset to stick to the goal that you set for yourself. So what do? If you do 2 hours of lead gen, do 4. Like how are you going to move the needle so that you can increase your activity to get to the results that you set for yourself? That's the 15th protocol. So the 4-in-1 is a really, really good tool. If you need a copy of that, let us know. We will absolutely send you a blank one that you can fill out. And it just keeps you focused on your own process. We were talking about best practices on certain lead gen stuff. Open house, Sam and I were talking about this. Sam, I'm not calling you out, but we brought this up earlier, which I thought was great. Open houses. One of the things she mentioned was she goes to open houses and there's like double-digit attendees, but there's no potential clients, like everyone's represented. So here's my thoughts. I'd love to hear yours too, is, doing an open house is not for that reason. I believe it or not, it's not to sell that home. Less than 1% of homes are sold as a result of having that open house. The open house is exposure and a reason for you to be in communication with other people. It's a cheat, it's a hack, in a good way, right? So if you do an open house, try to plan, if you can, at least 2 weeks in advance, maybe a week and a half at the very least, and do circle prospecting, do some door knocking. And your opportunity is getting in communication so that you're not knocking a door for a random reason. You're going, hey, Mr. Smith, how are you? Just let you know, I'm gonna be doing an open house across the street. Just want to let you know, hey, if anyone parks in your driveway, you let me know, and I'll make sure that they leave. Hey, by the way, beautiful home. How will you be, like, it's a reason to get into some dialogue, right? And if you have a rapport that's built, then circle back, make a note of it, circle back on the day of the open house and drop them off something. Hey, I just wanted to drop these candies off to you. I know that I saw some kids in here, hope that they enjoy it, or here's some movie tickets, or whatever it is, the item of value that you want to do. You're building a rapport and relationship. Hey, just to let you know, open house doesn't start till 2, but special VIP guests can come over 1 o'clock before all the poo-poos are already taken. Feel free to come over. You know what I mean? Like, it's that kind of stuff. Circle prospecting is also pulling up the list of data in the surrounding neighborhoods to find out who's most likely to sell for a variety of different algorithms. Maybe that's a VA loan and they've been there for 2.5 years, probably likely to sell. You probably want to knock on their door, right? You want to have as many of your signs up as possible because that's the billboard. We don't have billboards here. That's a free advertisement that you get for at least a few hours. The other thing too is, and I would use this trick all the time, is so if someone comes in, walks into the open house. In fact, Maria, you and I are going to do a class about open house conversion. So look for that. That's going to be coming probably next month or so. So, and we'll share our different wins and successes to that. But so here's one. Someone comes in and automatically they're on guard, right? They're like, oh no, I already have it. Thank you. I'm like, oh, no problem. But the owners have just asked me, I have to watch the home from, they just asked me to have everyone sign in. Would you mind just signing in? By the way, you can put your realtor's information too, not a problem. I'm trying to get them closer to me so I can have a conversation with them. And in the sign-in sheet, by the way, you can also use like your iPad and Command, which is really cool because you can create a landing page for that open house and they fill it in and it drops them into your Command database. It creates a smart plan for them and automatically tags them, like a no-brainer. But anyways, if you want to do that, talk to Carrie. But I would have these folders next to the sign-in sheet. And one would say off-market listings and properties. Another one would say distressed properties. Like I would have all these key things that it would be in a folder with just this name across. And every single time they're like, oh, what's that? But I appreciate you asking. This is for my clients. I'm happy. You mentioned that you work with an agent already. And then the truth starts to come out. It's like, well, I mean, I get emails from this guy. I never even met him before. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm happy to sit down with you. I can go over all this, go over what my value proposition is and how I can help you with your real estate goals. When's the best time for it? Then I'm setting up an appointment. But I drop that wall immediately because now I have something that they want. And that something that they want is something you can just print out. You can just go to the MLS and print out everything that has distressed properties. But have a different category. Or we have coming soon. Internally as well as on the MLS, that's the off market. So you can print it out. So now you're creating these like hot lists, but don't show them. Only print out one because they're going to ask you for a copy of this month. So sorry, this is my only copy. I can email it to you. And if they've already filled out the sign-in sheet, this is what I always see. They're like, let me give you my good email. And they cross out the fake email and then now they're writing the real email. But those are like little things, right? There's another thing that I would always do too. I got to try to find it because I haven't done this in a long time, but in a shifting market, you want to try to find good deals. So when you guys look at it, have you guys ever dealt with a client that's like, hey, I don't want to pay this price because the tax assessed value is X, whatever X is, right? The script for that I always tell them is, hey, in a hot market, the tax assessed value typically trails market value by X, whatever X is, and you can do the math to figure out in what area. Sometimes it's 5%, sometimes it's 15%, whatever. I would use that data, export a list off of all the listings that are active on MLS, and put it into a spreadsheet and analyze and compare that with the tax assessed value. And so you can have another list right here for investors. Like, cheap opportunities or whatever it is by analyzing the closest number to list price and tax assessed value. So it's doing the math for you. You're creating an algorithm. So on average, if list price leads tax assessed value by 15%, that's what it is normally. What if you found one that's 1%? Is that a good deal? That's a good deal in this market. That's a really good deal. What if you found one that's a list price is under tax assessed value? Is that a good deal? Is that a deal that some of your investors who want to flip would want to know about? Because investors are not loyal to anyone. They'll use you if you're the one that brings them the deal, right? So what if you printed this thing out and say, here's all the deals I found for you. You can create that list as well. So like I said, in a shifting market, you got to be super creative. Okay. Is pizza here?
It is, you don't need to bring it, we can bring it right.
Yeah, I'll wrap these up so that everyone can. So lastly, expense management, we kind of touched on it a little bit. If those of you who have a team, and a team could be you and assistant, or it could be you and a buyer's agent or whatever it is, you have to really analyze, especially in a shifting market, the return on investment. Return on investment applies everywhere across the board. It especially applies to your team too. If your team isn't lead generating and helping you either close deals, keep deals, do more business, you got to cut that expense or somehow kind of have them refocus or have them sit on the right seat on the bus or do more things. Whether it's doing their escrows or whatever it is, right? You absolutely have to. We talked about some other expenses that you should cut. If ever you want to sit down and have a consultation with me and I can help you go through some of your lead generating costs, I can help you analyze that because you've got to cut those expenses. Not all, the ones that aren't performing at a certain rate of return. Like you absolutely have to. That's super, super, super important. Gary Keller, one of the things he said is every single year you should be trying to cut by 10% during the show. And we just did that. Do you guys remember when we had the Kahala office? We cut it. We cut it because there's no rate of return. It was a nice office to have, but we're like, nope, we don't need that expense cut. We have a Kapolei office and we just expanded, which is a bigger expense, but we went from having like 5 offices to rent to like 13. So it paid for itself. Our expense as a market center is exactly the same. The agents offset for their expense and their side. So now we have more value to the agents and our expense was immense. You know what I mean? So you gotta look at it and try to cut as many things as possible. If nothing else, challenge yourself just to do that. Look at your own books. But guys, that's it for tactic 1 and 2. Yeah.
What's the expense, the purchase that you use?
Realty Zam.
Realty Zam.
Zam.
ZAM. I have a code too. I can send you guys that'll save you a couple. It's not expensive. It's like $100 a year or something like that. I use that, and I also use something called Mile IQ, which is for my accountant. And Mile IQ is great because it tracks your mileage and destination by GPS. So gone are the days of me like, and trust me, if you're filling out the form of like what your mileage is, what it started and where it ended, I promise you are a liar. There's no possible way you're telling the truth. But Realty Zam just prints out a report for you and it categorizes. So it remembers your destinations and it'll propose it like, hey, is this a business one or is this a, you can swipe, I don't know what is that dating app? I don't know. What's it called? Swipe left, swipe
Why
right?
do I come on dating apps?
No.
Why-
But it's like that, like you swipe left, right, whatever it is, it's the business or personal expense, right? So it's really, really helpful. Use Mile IQ, which I think is $60 a year, probably bad. Mile IQ, Realty Zam.
So that's if you own your vehicle, right? So if you're leasing your vehicle.
Then you can write off the entire lease.
You can write off the entire lease. Then Mile IQ just goes away.
Yeah, if you lease it, you can write off your entire expense. If you own your vehicle, then you want to keep track of mileage. Yeah. Any other questions? Any ahas? Any action items? What are you guys going to put in place? What are you guys going to do? We're in a shifting market. What are you guys going to do that's different that you might have been doing before? I'm not going to give you guys any pizza until someone tells me something.
We're gonna do everything you said.
Were you going to say something?
I'm gonna find ways to shorten my conversation because I spend too much time on talking with people and not being productive enough in that conversation.
That's great.
Supposed to do that,
Yeah.
I spend less time doing that and more time talking to additional people.
You can also use you know what, my other line's ringing, I gotta take this, that's an easy one to use, I use that. I use it all the time, but I probably have used it with someone.
So what about hiring an assistant to screen through some of those phone calls?
So, one of the things that KW is real big on is like when you cut expenses, like you don't want to add on additional personnel or admin. One of the things that we're trying to do to help offset some of that for you guys as agents is we have a whole VA team so that you don't have to hire your own person. You can just use an hour or 2 or 3 so that you don't have to, it's not an expense that's fixed. It's an expense that you can completely control for a very specific amount of time. So the answer to that is we have a solution for that. We have a solution for a lot of things. We have a concierge service that you can rent out a VA, a virtual assistant who can help manage your database. It can help set appointments for you, whatever those, tag your database. We can write purchase contracts for you, get it BIC approved and signed and sent back to you. That's actually, Maria helped with that brainchild for that. Also pre-listing and listing packet preparation, which also includes like preparing comps and tax information and property profile information. We also have property management, which you know. We have a lot of ancillary services that we're trying to build and continue to add on for your benefit so that you don't have to go out and reinvent the wheel. You don't have to go spend the money. You just focus on what you do best, which is maintaining that relationship with your client.
So I think it's helpful just to have a number of contacts that you want to get every day, like as opposed to the time frame. So it's like really forcing you to, you know, like talk with and, you know, have those specific contacts. So, you know, 20 a day or whatever. And it helps. And it also helps you in your mind, 'cause, you know, you have to get so many more contacts to get off that conversation, right? Like you're motivated to get to the next contact because, and then you make it more brief because you know that it's going to take you way longer that day if you don't. So, yeah.
It's like 3 p.m. and you're like on conversation 3. You're like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh.
You're
I gotta
looking at
go.
your little.
And then you don't have to be in bold or ignite. There are over 300 agents in the market center to connect with, right? Because then the sharper you are on the phone and you're highly intentional with your contacts, you're spending less time on it because you're being more purposeful. That's script practice, right?
Yeah,
And
that's script.
having relationship with other people in here, like reach out to somebody.
And by the way, guys, too, we do have script practicing here. If you guys want to have that energy and synergy and see what other people are doing. So I think it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, right, in the morning. We also have lead gen here too, that you can lead gen with some people too. So you don't need to do it every single time, but if you want to like be in the mix and be in the room with that energy, we highly encourage you to participate. Yeah, cool. Thanks for coming, guys. The next one, I don't remember who knows teaching the next one.
Surprise.
It's either going to be probably the Tongs or the Lallies or what have you. So they're going to be teaching tactics 3 and 4. But we highly recommend that you keep coming back so that you can, you know, refine your business and prepare for the shift. So thanks for coming. Enjoy some pizza. Stay, chat, mingle, all that. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, here, I'm gonna hand this up to this.